I think it's been always fascinating to me to pick up a magazine or newspaper or somewhere where you encounter art mediated through someone's perspective. As things have grown more diverse, as our notion of the artist has expanded, right? That our notions of who gets to write about that art have not. For me, this magazine is an opportunity to sort of push back against some of those notions and also push back against the idea of what a critic can be, what an art writer can be. That's the sort of thing about, looking at a work of art. There's no universal way to do that, right? And so to have these different perspectives allows for different ways of seeing. In sort of allowing for these artists to sort of do whatever they want with a page of the magazine, it was more of a proposition. It was almost curatorial in an impulse. What I was also surprised at was that artists were a lot more interested in writing, but actually being able to sort of define in the moment how you see their work. I'm gonna editorialize around my work, I think that's sort of interesting. And I'm like, that's something that should be totally explored. In this moment of Instagram, this moment of sort of living our lives online, 70-second lives online. And it's like, before you would not, artists were super like, don't take my picture, I don't, Now you have this moment where you're like, no, I will take the photo. Here's a self-image, which I really found sort of fascinating. And it was like so different in the way that they were sort of imaging self. In commissioning these 5 curators, I wanted to just know what they thought. Because those dialogues, or because their voices are not showing up in this sort of very public debate. And I think you get a range of responses. One curator it opens with sort of an affirmation, right? And sort of a endeavoring for not just the museum sort of worker, but also the public who sort of completes the circle, right? To dream, right, of what a museum could be. And then you get sort of like, on the sort of other end of that, this cannot be reformed. It must be abolished, it must be replaced. It was important to sort of like start to have this conversation about sort of who gets to define taste, desire, beauty, power, And I think that this was an opportunity to sort of do that. So there's a lot of different sort of things that go into the creating of art, and to have that sort of shown in a magazine is always my goal. One of the things I've always didn't understand about magazines, like particularly art magazines or newspapers that sort of have dedicated art sections, is like you have the most creative people in the world, and like you're just laying image in text on a page, like where is the sort of, how can we sort of use their creativity, which we're all in awe of, in these pages to make it, sort of pop more, And so I think that is something that I also am always thinking about is like, is that like, how do you just employ artists in the magazine or newspaper that is inevitably about their work? One of the things that we have is Tyler Mitchell and Amy Sherald in conversation about sort of the new American image. And from their perspectives, right? You have a painter and you have a photographer, and they're talking. No, it's not mediated. It's not, there's not some interviewer there. It's to have them sort of engaged. In a magazine where you have essentially a controlled space that you're constructing, you're able to sort of have those different sort of, sort of curate or craft those different sort of perspectives that I think that allows for a little bit more thoughtful sort of engagement. I'm just so deeply interested, and maybe it's just the writer in me, but I'm just so interested in what people do with space, because there's just infinite, and I think that's what frankly brought me to sort of love and think art to be one of the most important things that, people make, is because it's straight up the imagination. And so I'm always interested in seeing sort of the different ways people are thinking about creative expression and how they sort of wrestle that to a page. It was really important for me to not sort of make a magazine that was just like consensus building. I think that like I'm not interested in it. I find that often boring. I'm sort of interested in like you bring yourself to the table, I'll bring myself, and then we all have sort of a cornucopia of voices.